All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. Today we are going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Houston Texans. I just got back from the city of Houston yesterday, just in time to avoid their catastrophic loss to the Detroit Lions, albeit it doesn't really have too many repercussions in terms of their playoff hunt. We will talk about the NFL MVP race after Lamar, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes all won, and Jared Goff won, but only in the sense that his team did. And then we'll close out by talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder, whose fortunes have perhaps changed a little bit in the wake of Chet Holmgren being ruled out for 8 to 10 weeks, though I don't think they perhaps changed as much as some people might think. But let's start with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Drew. They're our stock up team. They snatch a win from the Commanders with Mike Williams, oddly the hero. They are in a huge game. They are 3-point dogs at home to Baltimore this coming week. The line is 47.5. They are plus 220 to win the AFC North, so very viable. What do you rate this team right now in terms of where they sit in the hierarchy of the league? Is this a 1 point better than average team on neutral, that type of range?
Well, based on the way I have been rating them, my answer is incorrect because I've been betting against the Steelers and it has not gone especially well. The Russ Wilson, kind of shot in the arm as far as giving this offense a dimension that they didn't have with Fields is clearly apparent. The deep ball is working, and credit to Art Smith, who I held in somewhat low regard after a really kind of miserable exit in Atlanta. I thought this was okay, good luck, guys, but no, this is actually working. It doesn't always feel sustainable, but the fact that they've absorbed now some offensive line injuries and they've come through it fine, the fact that they don't really seem to be kind of in bad game states, especially. They're always kind of in manageable game states because their defense is good enough, is definitely helping. I think it's time to start taking these guys seriously because, certainly the negatives that we saw with Russell Wilson's performance in Denver just haven't really manifested. He was unable to take advantage over, the middle of the field. He wasn't even targeting guys in the intermediate middle of the field, and he is now. And I think in general, whatever experience the Denver Broncos, whatever experience he had in Denver has ultimately he's come out on the other side as a better quarterback. And this was supposed to be the time where the Steelers were going to go into schedule hell and their, preseason look ahead numbers, they're dogs in every game all the way in here. And now there's a couple of games against Cleveland where they might not be dogs. A couple of games against Cincinnati where I think right now you would have to rate the Steelers as better than Cincinnati, maybe as a team overall, certainly not an offense, but a team overall. And, my fair number on these guys coming into week 10 was 0. And I think coming out of week 10, 1 point better than an average team on a neutral is reasonable. And most of this is because I have been sort of reluctantly acknowledging and upgrading my quarterback rating. If he's going to have chemistry with Mike Williams on top of what is already clearly budding chemistry with George Pickens, then maybe this is not even just an adequate offense, but a good offense. So, I'm going to be very interested to see how the final chapter here goes for the Steelers, because traditionally they do build into the close. Traditionally they do get better when the weather gets colder and the defense, starts to matter more and the running game starts to matter more. So, it just might be their year this year, and I don't know that there's enough latitude for them to run down a team that I have hold in as high regard as the Ravens, but certainly feels like they are clearly locked into a wild card spot right now in the AFC playoff picture. There's the Chargers and the Steelers are 5 and 6, and I don't know that that's changing anytime soon.
Okay. I still think the Bengals are probably better than the Steelers on neutral. I think that the Steelers have benefited a little bit from a schedule that hasn't been so imposing. They really could have lost that first Russ game against the Jets if not for some wonky turnovers, and then they beat the Giants in fine but not overly impressive fashion, and then they beat the Commanders by 1 point in a game that could have gone either way. So I don't think either of those three defenses that Russ has played have been super dominant or terrifying. Like Russell Wilson last year by PFF grade was the 18th ranked quarterback in the NFL. You know where he ranks this year, Drew? 18th ranked quarterback in the NFL once again, and he's 6th in EPA per play, which I think is a bit more reflective of just getting a little bit lucky with avoiding turnovers, thinking about those fluky jump balls that he was throwing in the Jets game that happened to land in the hands of George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth. So I think Russ is fine, but he's going to get some tougher tests, albeit, Baltimore's pass defense, Cincinnati's pass defense in the next couple of weeks, or 2 of the next 3 weeks, not terrifying, but he's going to have to play 2 games against the Browns, who still have a functional defense. He's going to have to play Philadelphia, whose defense is improved, Kansas City as well. So I think that the magic will run out at some point, and I think this is going to end up being an average to slightly below average offense. But to me, the more interesting thing about Pittsburgh is how good their defense is or not. Right now, they are 7th in EPA as a defense. They are 10th in DVOA. Do you think that's kind of reflective of where they are as a solidly above average defense, but not, a top 3 to 5 type of unit?
I think that's very, very accurate description. Certainly there are coverage issues with this unit, and up against a team that has multiple ways to really put pressure on your pass defense. They have been somewhat exposed at times. And so I think, the games, particularly the games against the Bengals, are going to be really instructive and fascinating. This week coming up against the Ravens is going to be, is going to be awesome for a lot of reasons. But the Ravens passing game right now is clicking on all cylinders, and it should be able to really put a hurting on this Steelers defense. So this is strength on strength, obviously. But so much of the Steelers defensive success has been unsustainable, chaotic sort of stuff, as opposed to just flat out beating your opponent 1v1 with scheme or just talent. And so I think there are certainly going to be games where they get exposed. And I think holding them right now is somewhere in the 5 to 7 range across the NFL is correct. I would put it, like in contrast, I would put it a defense like the Chiefs as more sustainable, and a defense of like the Steelers as, a little bit more opponent specific.
That's fair. TJ Watt has had such a weird season where he keeps on making these huge splash plays. I think his raw stats kind of undersell the impact that he's having. Like he got screwed out of a couple of huge plays in week 1 against Kirk Cousins in particular, because of penalties that weren't his doing. But he didn't have a stat yesterday, or Sunday rather. So he is the defensive player of the year favorite. I think he's the most likely guy to win, but it's just weird. Like he's TJ Watt. He has 6.5 sacks in 9 games. The defense is not a top 5 unit, and he's minus money to win the award. Now, the thing is that someone has to win the award. Doesn't matter if his overall case is not as good as the cases of Myles Garrett last year or TJ Watt the year before, or these Aaron Donald seasons. He only has to beat the guys around him in his field, but it is a bit more of a vulnerable case than your typical minus 140 favorite after week 10. Let's jump to the Texans, who are a very odd team at the moment. I thought that Stroud was excellent to start the game against the Lions, and then it slowly began to unravel. They really can't get the run game, or they couldn't get the run game going against Detroit, despite Bobby Slowick repeatedly leaning into it for reasons unknown to me. Their defense is banged up and a little bit enjoys playing the lottery of making huge plays and then giving up splash plays as well. What do you think the outlook is for this team going forward? Do you think that they are kind of locked into being tiers below the Ravens, Bills, and Chiefs in the AFC, and they belong more in the realm of teams like the Steelers and Chargers?
Sadly, yes. Maybe even below the Steelers and the Chargers based on health. I was very bullish on this Texans team coming into the season because on paper, particularly with the weapons that they added on offense, it just felt like continued emergence and growth for CJ Stroud. And, as his trajectory went up, he was going to enter the pantheon of the quarterbacks of the teams that you mentioned who are clearly on the tier above him and the Texans. And instead, it has been a little bit of a step backwards this season. And there are are lots of reasons to point to why. Slow sequencing and just play design don't feel very special at all. Sequencing in particular feels extremely predictable. The offensive line, which last year you'll remember was hurt, it felt like every single week they were pulling guys off of practice squads and off of other teams' practice squads and starting them at tackle. And it was like, oh my gosh, CJ Stroud, he's in so much trouble. No, he was fine. But this year, when the pressure gets to him for whatever reason, he's not making great decisions. He is consistently under duress, and it doesn't feel like that the way you describe sort of the defense being lottery. Well, the offense is lottery too. They're leaning to CJ Stroud on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10 constantly and saying, hey man, do something special. And with Nico Collins unavailable and Stephon Diggs unavailable, it just hasn't been the same at all. Now, Nico Collins, I'm expecting will come back. And I think ultimately you have to have this offense as rated kind of 19th to 15th to 19th in the NFL. And that may sound low saying that out loud, but yeah, there's some serious problems that are keeping them grounded. And then the defensive side of the ball is where they have in general gotten wins this year to this point. And I think ultimately, like, their boomer bust nature is going to have huge issues both when they play elite teams down the stretch here and when they get into the playoffs, and ultimately is going to keep them, somewhat in check. Will Anderson, I would expect will be back, but I think he's going to miss, it sounds like, a couple weeks. And then the secondary certainly needs to stay healthy or get healthier if they're going to be competitive at all in the month of December and beyond. And I think in general, the Texans are very lucky to be in an AFC South where we thought, boy, there's a lot of fun, interesting teams here. Things could happen at the start of the season. And then all three of the other teams in their division have effectively belly flopped. The Jags look like they have called it a season. Not expecting to see Trevor Lawrence back there anytime soon. And the Mac Jones experience was underwhelming. The Titans are going to, I assume, keep playing Levis just to see if they can develop anything there, as he is a very cheap asset, and if nothing else, they'll just lose their way to a better draft pick to replace him. And then the Colts are trotting out your man Joe Flacco, who was not a great experience watching him play football on Sundays. I think he's missing the couch, sadly. So the Texans are gonna kind of win the South by default, it feels like, and then maybe home dogs to the Chargers in the 4-5.
Yeah, I think that if Nico and Will Anderson are back, that the Texans would be favored in that game. But yeah, I think that it would just purely be by virtue of having home field advantage, and they might be a slightly. I think they're probably the same level of team as the Chargers, but you can make the case that they're slightly worse. I wouldn't really bat an eyelid at that. What price would you need to back that Bryce Young has a better career than CJ Stroud? Because 3 weeks ago or whatever, it was like
minus 5,000.
Yeah. And look, it's obviously extremely unlikely, but in terms of you take out, career-ending injuries and whatever, all things being equal, and just like who has more generated total EPA over the course of their careers, I think like Bryce Young might be a 2 to 5% chance or whatever of that, all things being equal, as opposed to the 0 to 0.5.
Yeah, 5% sounds pretty optimistic to me. 1 to 2% is probably more realistic. I think one of the things that was going to have to happen for Bryce Young was even more than just maturing into the position. He was going to need to kind of grow physically, and that's just not happening. So I think he's always going to be subject to the issues associated with being a very small man out there with enormous monsters. And best of luck to him. But I'm happy he's not kind of covering himself in misery these last couple of weeks. But there's still a long way to go for him.
Yeah, he looked fine against the Giants. He looked like he was. I think the idea on Bryce has always been that maybe he can be the Kansas City version of Alex Smith or something like that. And I think that is within the range of outcomes. 5% rich, but I might back 60 to 1 that Bryce Young is up with CJ Stroud. These things they often change quickly. All right, let's talk about NFL. MVP, the market there. Jared Goff kindly, respectfully withdrew from the race, I think, on Sunday night, Drew. He looked at the internal polling. He saw that Lamar Jackson has 400 electoral votes, and he decided to step away and let the stronger candidates duke it out. So Goff is removed from all the guys who were 10-1 or shorter. That is now a group of 3. Lamar Jackson plus 115 at BetMGM, Josh Allen plus 350, Patrick Mahomes plus 700. I think that barring massive outliers, that those are still the 3 guys who gobble up potentially 90 to 95% of the market. Fair. I think that Goff might still be the 4th most likely player to win, but it's a very tiny amount now, just because he has a path to going 15-2 and a 1 seed, and he could just get lucky with his stats. But I think it's very unlikely now that he wins MVP. The way that I would frame this market, Drew, is: would you take Lamar Jackson over the field at this point?
I would.
Yeah, I would as well, and I think that he should be. I think that if he just gets to 12 wins, which is about minus 120, I think it's over at that point, barring some massive outliers. I just think he has such a huge lead statistically over Allen, and I think that if he just gets to 12 wins, just goes 5-2 down the stretch and dodges Allen getting the 1 seed, and Lamar still might beat him in that case, and dodges Mahomes going 17-0, I think it's probably a wrap.
Yeah, that's well said. And I guess I'm kind of sad that Goff took his hat out of the ring this early. He was always going to be the fool's gold in this market up against those other names. And, I honestly think a player like Kyler Murray and what he's doing, it has a better case or a better chance than Goff, just because watching it's much more engaging, and it's drawing, it draws attention much more than what Goff is doing, which is so much more subtle and so much more complementary to what Ben Johnson is doing as a play designer in a lot of ways. And, in the same way that Brock Purdy gets dinged for being, the disciple of a Kyle Shanahan system that's brilliant, I think Goff will always live in that shadow as well. Whereas the 3 guys at the top of the market are, they're the 3 best quarterbacks in football. I think we all would collectively agree. And in some order, getting the MVP votes based on just what is their individual contributions to their team success this year, combined with the team success, will ultimately shake it out. And I agree. I think that it probably should go, right now, at least, somewhere in the 55 to 60% chance for Lamar Jackson, somewhere in the 30% chance for Mahomes, and then the rest goes to Allen for me. And I honestly, the 4th, this kind of doesn't matter. Like, I'm not sure I see a world where one of those 3 men doesn't ultimately get the lion's share of the number 1 votes. Yep,
I think that's fair. I mean, the rest of the 5%, 8%, whatever the field is against those 3. Those are outcomes like I make it a surprisingly high 4% chance that Cincinnati runs the slate. Like that type of thing would need to happen, or Goff is 15-2, 16-1, and just kind of has another 6-week stretch that he's coming off now. The thing with Goff, though, is that he's just not as good as these guys. And
right.
I get that last year, in terms of how people think about MVP, last year warped a lot of norms that probably usually hold to be true, in that, guys like Tua and Purdy and Dak, they all took their turn at the top of the market. And I think last year, it kind of, the way that people were thinking about the market and the way it played out, it put overemphasis on week to week and head-to-head matchups. And the reason why, because it was like, a guy would just get knocked off every week. It's like, all right, Dak, you're the favorite. Oh, you lost to Josh Allen in Buffalo. Now you're done. Oh, Brock Purdy's the favorite. Oh, you lost to Lamar Jackson on Christmas. Now you're done. Tua has like a stretch, and then he's terrible on Black Friday, I think, against the Jets. Oh, you're done. And I think the reason why that is, or why that was, is that those 3 guys never had MVP pedigree, and they had to prove it every single week that they were worthy of being in the discussion. And then it just meant that it was all a house of cards. And Brock Purdy almost made it through past the final end boss, and was almost able to keep the house of cards intact through to winning the award. But guys like Allen, Mahomes, Lamar, Burrow, if the team had a better record and was in the discussion, these guys are so much more resilient in terms of their pedigree.
No
like
doubt.
Lamar Jackson, if he loses to the Steelers next week, it's not like everyone's like, oh, he's not an MVP level player. Like, it'd be ridiculous. He just needs to make it up with wins after that. Same with Josh Allen. Like, all these guys, they are MVP level, and it just makes them, their cases so much more solid and resilient to individual weeks. So I think the way that this would go south for Lamar is that he loses the division, which is possible. Like, he's a minus 200 favor or so to win the division. If he loses that, then it becomes a little bit dicey. If he closes 4-3, which is not inconceivable, then 11-6 going up against Allen at 13-4 and Mahomes at 16-1 when Lamar won last year and has never made a Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff. Then I think it gets a bit wonky, but I think the two bets in the market are Lamar at plus 115, because I think he should be odds on, and honestly, Mahomes at plus 100. He would be the other one. I just don't think Allen is he's stuck in this place where he's just a worse version of Lamar's case in basically every possible way outside of having one more win than Lamar. But I think that kind of even gets devalued because his path to the 1 seed is so fraught.
Yeah, plus Lamar beat him head to head convincingly. And I think, I don't know, that's not a tiebreaker for a lot of people, but total EPA right now, Lamar has over 60-point lead on Josh Allen. That's crazy.
Not close. Merit, it's not at all close.
He needs to go on a sustained month of playing poorly and giving back his EPA lead that he's built to this point, I think, to really open the door. The Mahomes case is the only other one worth talking about, in my opinion, because of the potential for 17-0, which is apparently on the table. I can't believe it. Blocked field goals and penalties and weird things, all contributing to this. Is sometimes that's what you need to have, just the outrageous happen, but it's on the table right now.
Yeah. So the last thing I want to say about this, well, one with Mahomes, I'm just not sure the team is that good relative to the level that you need to be to run the slate from here. And obviously they're a good team, but I think this is a team that's more in the range of 5 to 6 points better than your average team on neutral, as opposed to 7 to 8. And so just each week is kind of losable when they're not an absolute juggernaut. So I think that is ultimately going to be Mahomes' undoing, is that he's just going to lose some random game. Like, he almost lost to Denver at home. Like, he almost lost to the Bucs at home. Some random game is going to bite them because they're just not a total juggernaut. Last thing on this, I think a lot of people, some people who pay close attention to this, they might think, well, what if Lamar just loses to the Steelers this week? It's only, the line is 3. It's in Pittsburgh. And what if Josh Allen beats Patrick Mahomes? And it's like, that would completely reorient the market, where Mahomes is he's almost dead at that point, or at least goes from, in my mind right now, 15% equity to more like 5 to 7% equity. And Allen would skyrocket. He'd be 1 game off of the 1 seed with the tiebreak over KC. And then Lamar would be in huge danger of just being a wild card. It's like, all that stuff is very conceivable to happen. That money line parlay is also like plus 330. And that's what you need to just get Allen back right into the discussion. So it's, less than a 25% chance that hits. So I think if you're betting into this market, if you have Lamar or if you have Mahomes, I just think Allen's price right now is it's just not appetizing enough in the, plus 350 type of range. So I think the play is just to go to war with Lamar Jackson. And there are certainly worse things to do than that. All right. Before we get to the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Stars are out in Los Angeles for Sunday Night Football when Justin Herbert and the Chargers host Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Tune into NBC and Peacock at 7 p.m. Eastern as we lead you up to kickoff in Southern California.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See betmgm.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
All right, let's close out talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder in the wake of Chet Holmgren's pelvic fracture after that fall against Golden State. He's going to miss 8 to 10 weeks. This obviously removes him from the Defensive Player of the Year race. It hurts the Thunder in terms of their odds to get the 1 seed in the West, to win the Northwest Division, which is minus 150 after being minus 275. They've drifted back to plus 275 to win the West. Do you think there's any way to bet into any Thunder-related markets after Chet's injury?
Well, I'm still very much hold the Thunder up in the absence of Chet Holmgren as the best team in the West, but the margin now went from huge to narrow. And my expectations and the reports that we're hearing that this is an 8 to 10 week injury, I'm going to say that's optimistic. This to me feels much more like after, because pelvic fractures phenomenally painful. Like he realistically might be in bed for 2 weeks trying to just manage the pain before he can, start doing any type of rehab. And then at that point, like it's more walking, it's more before you're running. And there's a very reasonable chance that they just kind of sit on him until we are very close to the playoffs. And then he gets slowly integrated in the late, in the months of later part of March into April of, kind of a very slow on-ramping. And I think Dagano is the type of coach that can certainly work with the pieces he has available to mitigate some of the issues that the absence of Chet presents. I have in general been impressed. I don't even know if impressed is the right word, but I've been blown away with the degree to which they can find really, really useful participation from players well down this roster. And we haven't even really seen, them kind of put together their best possible second unit, in my opinion. So this is probably going to hurt them against the elite teams in the West in the regular season head to head, much like what we saw in the last game. But I still think they are probably going to get the 1 seed. They're probably going to win their division. And I think the expecting that Holmgren will be back by the playoffs helps them still be the current favorite in the West. But I don't know. My antennae are up about how serious this injury is beyond what they're saying, 8 to 10 weeks. And just in general, this is now 2 pretty meaningful injuries for Chet. He might just be Porzingis 2.0, where you just need to keep him as healthy as possible for a playoff push. And the rigors of an 82 game regular season just aren't it for him.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, we'll see. Like I think he played all 82 games last year and then throughout the playoffs as well. And in theory, a lot of, 7-footer type injuries, and the reason why they are such a high injury risk is that they're just placing a lot of weight on their feet and their knees. And guys like Chet and Wemby, in theory, because they are so lean, they should be less disposed to that, though also not so much fat and skin covering the hip.
Yeah.
Rounds on to be fair, it was a freak play though. But I'm not too sure about Chet's long-term outlook in that regard. But I think in terms of the Thunder for this season, I think they're going to be fine. And the reason why is that Isaiah Hartenstein is coming back, it's like in 2 to 3 weeks. And when they get Hartenstein back, the beauty of the Thunder is that they have all these guys who can scale up their roles. Like, Alex Caruso can do a lot more than what he's doing right now if like Lou Dort was to get hurt. Isaiah Hartenstein can slide in and be, 28 to 30 minutes a game of really high level center play, as opposed to, the 20 to 22 or whatever he'd be playing off the bench if Chet was healthy. Lynn Williams is going to come back in, I believe, about a month, and then be one of the better backup centers in the league too. So I think they're just going to have to kind of gut through this next 2 to 3 weeks until Hartenstein comes back. But, it's not like they're a bad team as currently constituted. And so that if they can just kind of make their way through this stretch, and then I think that when Hartenstein comes back, they go back to being the best team in the West. In terms of actually betting on them, I still think that plus 275 to win the West is value. I think that minus 150 to win the division is good. And that is more a commentary on the fact that I'm not sure the Timberwolves are all that good. I watched the end of that Miami-Minnesota game on Sunday, and like Chris Finch, for as good a coach as he seems to be, he makes some bizarre decisions. And they just don't, maybe it's not Finch, maybe it's the kind of collective cerebral intelligence of the team. Like on the final play, they didn't know who was inbounding the ball. Like Randall and Edwards didn't know what was going on. And it was just a complete disaster. They weren't prepared for Spo's game-winning inbounds play, though, to be fair, it was pretty sick. Construction of the team is just a little bit weird. And I don't know. It's just when Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards are making decisions at end of games, it makes me a little bit nervous. And then the Nuggets just aren't. I just don't think that they're that good outside of Jokic being the best player in the league by some margin now. I think, honestly, the biggest ripple effect in terms of markets of the Chet injury is a bump for Jokic to win MVP, because it's going to be a lot harder for Shea to get to, being a 66-win dominant
huge
one
margin,
seed.
right?
So I think that is the biggest movement, really.
Oh, that's interesting. Best closing five now for the Thunder once Hartenstein comes back. You got it's just an embarrassment of riches with this roster. SGA, Jalen Williams. You put Caruso on the floor, Hartenstein on the floor, and then if you want more defense, you go with Dort. If you want more offense, you go with Aaron Wiggins. I mean, like they can kind of Isaiah Joe, yeah. Like they can kind of still do some pretty diabolical things to teams, and they're going to look different. It's going to catch people by surprise. I think my hope is that they scuffle a bit, waiting for Hartenstein to come back, and then there's a buy low on them for division, because I agree that's still very much theirs. The Nuggets and Jokic are amazing, but he is playing some extremely high leverage minutes very early in the season, and playing them very hard, and fatigue is going to eventually creep, I would expect, unless they kind of take their foot off the gas at some point, and the team is not good enough to win if they do take their foot off the gas. So hopefully like January-ish, sometimes the Nuggets swoon comes around and people have forgotten how good the Thunder is, and there's a buy low on them.
Yeah, right now a Celtics Thunder finals to bet on that is 7-1. Certainly feels like more than a 12-13% chance that we're getting that finals matchup, though. There is a lot of season still to go. All right, we are done for now. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also, a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From myself and Drew, we'll see you soon.